My name is Ibrahim Al-Omari. I am 63 years old, and at this stage of my life, I have nothing left to protect except the truth. When you have lived this long, when you have buried people you loved and watched your own hair turn grey and felt your knees remind you every morning that the body does not last forever, you stop being interested in appearances. You stop managing what people think of you. What you care about, what you become desperate to hold on to, is what is real. And what I am about to tell you is the most real thing that has ever happened to me. I never thought I would say these words. Not to my children, not to my oldest friends, not even to myself in the quiet of my own room at night. But I saw what I saw. And I am 63 years old, and my eyes are still good, and my mind is still clear, and I know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. What happened to me during my Hajj pilgrimage was real, every part of it. And I cannot spend whatever time God has left for me on this earth, carrying it in silence. I was born in the city of Taif, in the Shed region of Saudi Arabia, the city of roses and honey and cool mountain air, the city that sits above the heat of the surrounding desert like a man standing on a high place looking out. I grew up in a household where faith was not optional and not merely cultural, but the actual substance of daily life. My father prayed 5 times a day without exception for as long as I knew him. My mother kept her Quran on the kitchen table the way other women keep a vase of flowers, as a natural and beautiful part of the ordinary space. I memorized the opening chapter of the Quran before I started school. I grew up knowing who I was and what I believed and where I stood before God, and I never questioned any of it, because there was nothing in my life that made questioning necessary. I worked for 35 years in the municipality of Taif, administrative work, city planning, the kind of steady, reliable career that a steady, reliable man builds in a steady, reliable city. I married my wife Mariam when I was 26. We have 4 children and 11 grandchildren and a house in the Al-Hada district that has known more noise and laughter and ordinary family chaos than I could ever properly describe. I am not a famous man. I am not a scholar or a politician or a man whose name appears in newspapers. I am an ordinary man who lived an ordinary life with genuine faith at the center of it. And for 30 years, the one thing I had not yet done, the one gap in the life I had built, was Hajj. Every year I told myself this would be the year. Every year something came up. The children were young and needed things. The salary did not stretch far enough. The timing was wrong. I watched other men from my neighborhood return from Makkah, transformed, wearing the title of Haji like a garment of honor. And I felt the particular ache of a man who has been meaning to do the most important thing and has not yet done it. When I finally retired and the children were grown and Mariam sat across from me at dinner one evening and said, Ibrahim, this year we go. I felt something open in my chest that I had not known was closed. We saved for 2 more years after that conversation. We planned carefully, we prayed about it. And when the day finally came that we put on our Ihram garments and joined the millions moving toward Makkah, I wept. I am not a man who weeps easily, but I wept that day with the gratitude of a man who has finally arrived at something he has been walking toward his whole life. The city of Makkah during Hajj is something that no description fully captures. I had heard people try my whole life, and I had thought I understood what they were describing. I did not understand until I was inside it. The scale of it, the density of it, the sheer number of human beings gathered in one place for one purpose. It overwhelms every sense simultaneously. Millions of people dressed in the same simple white cloth, stripped of all markers of status and nationality and wealth, moving together like a single living thing, a single heartbeat made up of millions of individual heartbeats. The sound of prayers from every direction, in every language, layered over each other into something that is no longer individual voices, but a collective sound, a sound the earth itself seems to produce rather than the people standing on it. I had carried burdens to Makkah. Every pilgrim carries something. That is the nature of the journey. That is why we come. I carried 35 years of accumulated regrets, moments I had handled badly as a father, words I had said to Mariam in anger that I could never fully take back, prayers I had performed carelessly, years when the faith had been form rather than substance, a decade when I had been so busy building the ordinary life that I had neglected to tend the interior one. I carried all of this into the Grand Mosque, and I intended to lay it down. That was why I had come, to lay it down and go home lighter. On the third evening of our time in Makkah, Maryam was resting and I went alone to perform tawaf, the circumambulation of the Kaaba, the walking of circles around the black cube that has been the center of Muslim worship for 14 centuries. The courtyard was full as it always is, as it never stops being during Hajj. I joined a moving current of worshippers and began to walk, my lips moving in the prayers I had memorized, my heart reaching toward something I had been reaching toward my whole life. The man beside me was younger, perhaps 35, broad-shouldered, with the focused expression of a man who is somewhere sacred and knows it. His name, I would learn later, was Nasser. He noticed my slower pace and moved slightly to give me room, and at one point when the crowd pressed in, he placed a steadying hand briefly on my arm without being asked. Small gestures, the kind of small gestures that happen between strangers in that place, because the place itself asks something of the people inside it. I was thinking about my father. He had died 11 years ago without making Hajj, a grief he carried quietly to the end. I was walking these circles partly for him, carrying his name in my chest alongside my own, and the weight of that was making my steps heavy and my eyes wet. The prayers on my lips were real prayers, perhaps the most real I had produced in years. The reaching was genuine, the desire to be heard was genuine. And then I saw the light. I want to be careful here. I want to be precise. I am a man who spent 35 years in municipal administration. I am not a man given to exaggeration or dramatic embellishment. When I tell you I saw a light above the Kaaba, I am telling you what I saw with the same precision I would use to file an administrative report. A light appeared above the Kaaba, not the floodlights that illuminated the mosque. I know those lights. I had been looking at them for 3 days. Not a reflection of anything in the courtyard, not the moon, which was in a completely different part of the sky. A light that came from a source I could not identify, that had a quality completely distinct from any artificial or natural light I've encountered in 63 years of looking at the world. It was softer than any bright light has the right to be. Bright in a way that the eye could hold without pain. And it moved not erratically, not like a malfunction, but with the quality of something alive, something that had intention. The way water moves when it is responding to a current underneath the surface, rather than wind on top of it. I stopped walking. Nasser, the younger man, was still beside me. I said, "Do you see that, above the Kaaba?" He shaded his eyes and looked upward, and I watched his face change. "Yes," he said slowly. "What is that?" Around us, the change was spreading. The great moving current of the Tawaf began to slow. Not all at once. A ripple of slowing, of stopping, of people noticing and turning and pointing. The sound of the courtyard changed. The collective murmur of prayers, which had been continuous and layered and constant as breathing, began to break apart as people's attention moved upward. I heard voices around me. "Allahu Akbar," someone said. "What is happening?" said another. "Look, look," said a third. The light was taking form. This is the part I have rehearsed telling and still cannot tell adequately. The light was not static. It was moving in a way that produced a shape. Or rather, the shape was what the light was. The light was not illuminating a shape, but was itself the shape. And the shape was a figure, a man, standing. No, present is the better word. Present above the Kaaba, at a height I cannot calculate. in white that was not the white of the Ihram garments thousands of us were wearing, but a white that seemed to be made of the same substance as the light. His arms were not raised in judgment or command. They were extended slightly outward and downward in the posture of a person offering something rather than demanding something, in the posture of welcome. The courtyard had gone quiet in a way that I did not think was possible. Thousands of people, tens of thousands, and the sound simply left. Not gradually, not as a slow reduction of volume. It left the way air leaves a room when a window is suddenly sealed, completely and all at once. Even the children, and there were children in that courtyard, were silent, even the infants. Nasser's hand found my arm again. His grip was tight. He was trembling slightly. "Baba," he whispered. He called me Baba, the way young Saudis sometimes address older men, with the affectionate respect of a son. "Baba, what is that?" I could not answer him, not because I had no words, because the word that was forming in my mind was a word I was not ready to say, a word that would require me to do something with it if I said it. So I held it inside and I stared upward at the figure in the light, and I felt something that I am going to try very hard to describe accurately. I felt known, not observed, not evaluated, known, the way you feel known by someone who has been watching you your whole life with complete attention and complete understanding and complete, this is the word I keep arriving at and cannot move past, complete love. It did not feel like judgment. It felt like recognition, as if something that had always been looking at me had finally allowed me to look back. Some people around me had fallen to their knees. Some were covering their faces. Some were crying openly. Some were arguing. This is normal. This is a sign. We must not look. We must look. The ordinary human responses to the extraordinary. I did none of these things. I stood and I looked, and I felt the thing I have just tried to describe, and I said to myself very firmly, in the voice I used for 35 years, to keep administrative situations from becoming chaotic, "It is light. It is only light. There is an explanation. There is always an explanation." The figure remained for what my mind registers as several minutes, but which could have been 30 seconds. Time moved differently in those moments, as if it too had noticed something unusual and had adjusted its pace accordingly. Then the light began to withdraw, not abruptly, the way dawn reverses at the end of the day, gradually and then all at once. And then it was gone, and the sky above the Kaaba was the sky above the Kaaba, and the floodlights were the floodlights, and the thousands of people around me erupted simultaneously back into sound. I said to Nasser it was nothing, just light, something atmospheric. Even as I said it, I knew I did not believe it. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Baba, that was not atmospheric." I did not argue. I finished the tawaf. I returned to our room. Mariam was awake and I told her nothing, and I lay in the dark and I stared at the ceiling, and the figure was still there. Every time I closed my eyes, the arms extended, the welcome in the posture, the quality of the light that had no adequate explanation in any category I possessed. "It is just light," I said to the ceiling, but the ceiling offered no confirmation. Sleep came eventually, the way it comes when the body overrules the mind through sheer exhaustion. And when it came, it brought something with it. I was standing in a place I did not recognize and could not describe except in the most inadequate terms. Open, vast, lit from no single source. The kind of space that exists in that realm between sleep and the other thing that is sometimes confused with sleep, but is not sleep. I was alone, or I thought I was alone. "Ibrahim," the voice arrived the way I imagine a hand arrives on the shoulder of a man who does not know he needs steadying, before he has identified the need, before he has asked for help, already there. My name, in a voice that I cannot describe in terms of sound, only in terms of fact. It settled into me. It did not startle. It was as if it had always been present, and I had only just tuned to the frequency it was broadcasting on. I turned. He was there, the figure from above the Kaaba, but closer now. Near enough that the quality of his presence was unmistakable, not just a shape in light, but a person, specific and real and particular. His face was, I will not pretend I can describe his face. I am a man who works with language in the practical way of administrative documents, and I do not have the vocabulary for what I saw in that face. I will tell you only this. It was the face of someone who knew me completely and was not disappointed by what they knew. That is the closest I can get. I took a step forward, not backward. I had spent the entire evening telling myself to dismiss what I had seen and standing in front of it. Now I found the dismissal was no longer available to me. It had used up whatever energy it had in the ceiling staring hours and had nothing left. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. He looked at me, and the looking was not passive. It had a quality of active, intentional seeing, the way a doctor looks at something he is assessing, except without the clinical distance, with warmth instead of distance, with something that was the opposite of distance. He said, "I am the one you have been looking for without knowing my name." My heart did something I have no medical language to describe. I said, "I don't understand." He said, "You have sought God your whole life. In the prayers, in the fasting, in the journey you have made to this city. The seeking was real, the love behind it was real, and it was always reaching toward me. You simply did not know to call it by my name." I shook my head slowly. "I am a Muslim. I have always been a Muslim." "I know," he said. "And the love that made you one is not wrong. The longing it expressed is not wrong. The truth it pointed toward is not wrong. Come closer to the truth now. Come to the name." I felt my knees weaken. "What name?" I asked, though something in me already knew. Something in me had known since the courtyard, had known and had been fighting the knowing for hours. He said, "I am Jesus, the one sent from God, the Word made flesh, the way to the Father you have been seeking." No, the word came out before I had decided to say it. Not because I disbelieved what was in front of me, because I believed it and the believing was going to cost me more than I had brought to pay. No, this is not. I am not. My family, my life, everything I have. I know what it will cost, he said. His voice was not harder. If anything, it was gentler. I know every cost. I paid costs of my own. But Ibrahim, he said my name again, and the name sounded different in his mouth than it had ever sounded in any mouth, as if he was the one who had given it to me in the first place. "What I am giving you is worth what it will require." Tears were on my face. In the dream, in whatever the dream was, tears were on my face. "Why me?" I asked. "I am nobody. An old retired man from Taif. Why would you come to me?" "Because you came here," he said. "You saved for years and you traveled and you put on the white garment and you walked into the courtyard with your father's name in your chest and your own sins and your genuine searching heart. And I have been here the whole time, not waiting to be found, present, watching you search, watching you reach. And tonight I am telling you, you have arrived. Not where you thought you were arriving, somewhere better. Come." I fell to my knees in that place and I said the words that I had never said in 63 years of living and that I cannot take back and do not want to take back. I said, "I believe you. I don't understand everything. I am frightened of everything this means, but I believe you are who you say you are. And I am yours." The light around him became something my eyes could not fully receive. Not painfully, just beyond the capacity of the instruments, and his voice came one final time, warm and close and certain. "You are not alone," he said. "You never were." I woke up with the dawn prayer sounding from 1,000 minarets simultaneously. Mariam was stirring beside me. The room was ordinary, the world was ordinary, and I was not the man who had lain down in it. I told Nassar the next morning, He listened without interrupting, with the careful attention of a young man who has seen something with his own eyes and is weighing it against something he has been told all his life. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Baba, I have been awake all night too. I did not dream what you dreamed, but I cannot explain what we saw above the Kaaba, and I cannot explain what I felt standing in that courtyard." I looked at him, and he said, "I think you need to follow this, whatever it costs. I think you already know you need to follow this." He was right. I already knew. I returned to Taif a different man. I did not announce it. I did not make a public declaration. I am 63 years old, and I understand that truth requires courage, but not recklessness. I began quietly, obtaining a Bible through a careful channel, reading it in my study in the early hours before the house woke up, finding in its pages the same presence I had found in the courtyard and in the dream. Not a stranger, someone I had been walking toward without the correct name for 40 years. I told Mariam 4 months after our return. I sat her down at the kitchen table where we had made every significant decision of our marriage, and I told her everything: the light, the dream, the voice, the words. She listened with the stillness that long marriage produces, the stillness of a woman who has known a man long enough to know when he is telling her the deepest true thing. When I finished, she was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "The piece you came home with, I noticed it on the drive back from Makkah. I did not say anything because I did not know what to say, but I noticed it. You came home different." I said, "Yes." She said, "I am not where you are. I need time, but I am not leaving this table." I held her hands and I told of Fatima, of Hassa, of every wife in every testimony who has said the version of that same sentence: "I am not going anywhere." And I understood that this is its own kind of miracle, that a woman who loves her husband chooses to stay at the table while everything changes. It is not a small thing, it is one of the largest things. The consequences in Taif have been what you would expect, and I will not pretend otherwise. There are family members who no longer speak to me easily. There are men I played beside for 30 years who now cross the street with a different energy. My name in certain circles has acquired a new kind of weight. The weight of someone who has done something that the community does not have a comfortable category for. I received this without bitterness. I spent 35 years in administration. I know that systems respond to disruption with the tools available to them. I am the disruption, and the tools are what they are. What I cannot be is silent. I am 63 years old, and the figure stood above the Kaaba with his arms extended in welcome, and came into a dream and said my name and told me I had arrived somewhere better than I thought I was going. I cannot be silent about that. This testimony is my refusal of silence, whatever it costs, which it is still costing, and whatever it will cost, which I cannot fully calculate. I will not spend whatever time remains to me pretending I did not see what I saw. I saw him, above the most sacred place on earth, in the place where I had been taught no other name belonged. He was there. He has always been there. He was there before the Kaaba was built, and he will be there after everything built by human hands has returned to dust. And he came into a dream and said the name that changed everything, not to destroy what I had been, to complete it, to give it the name it had always been pointing toward. He is real. He is here. And I am at 63, with everything it has cost and everything it is still costing, the most certain I have ever been of anything in my life. That is my testimony, every word of it true.